When the end credits rolled on Matrix Resurrections, I only had one question left. What the hell? Let's talk about why. Return to a world of two realities, one everyday life, the other what lies behind it. To find out if his reality is a construct to truly know himself, Mr. Anderson will have to choose to follow the White Rabbit once more. The official synopsis for Matrix Resurrections, a reboot that I don't think anybody was really asking for. After recently watching the original Matrix trilogy for the Matrix recap that went up on channel just a few days ago, I was left with a lot of questions regarding Matrix Resurrections. Trinity died at the end of the last movie, that was clear. It looked like Neo had died at the end of the last movie. What was going to happen to Zion? What was going to happen to the Matrix? There was a lot of questions to be answered. But I will say that Matrix Resurrections does a pretty good job of addressing a lot of those issues. They're clearly very aware that they're making a reboot, to the point where that's even a thing in the movie.
It's all about set and setting.
After our first contact went so badly, we thought elements from your past might help ease you into the present.
Nothing comforts anxiety like a little nostalgia.
Now, the beginning of this movie is very confusing. The first 20 to 30 minutes, it takes a lot of head scratching to figure out what's going on. In fact, the opening scene of the movie, I said to myself, this seems very familiar. It seems very much like the original movie. And then very quickly I said, this is the original movie. It was the exact same opening scene. However, different faces, different actors. What's going on? I'm not going to give too many spoilers, but I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that at the beginning, it's revealed that Thomas Anderson is in the Matrix, and he's a game designer who's designed a game called The Matrix. In fact, there's been 3 games called The Matrix, made by a publisher called Warner Brothers. A little bit on the nose, a little bit stupid for most movies, but that's the thing, this movie kind of gets away with it because it's The Matrix. It's perhaps the one movie franchise that could do something like this and get away with it in a non-comedic way. Like, this isn't a comedy movie, but some of those moments were pretty funny. In fact, Thomas Anderson has on his desk certain Matrix collectibles I've had in my lifetime. You know, like the Trinity figure where she's falling with the guns. I've had that one. He has it on his desk in a Matrix movie. It's very fourth wall breaking, but it makes sense because he's in the Matrix. They're trying to trick him into believing that what happened didn't happen. Now, they do go a little bit far with that in terms of they actually show footage from the original movies in this movie to Neo. But I guess they can kind of get away with that too, because anything can happen in the Matrix. Now, the sequels to the original Matrix movie, Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, are somewhat controversial, that some people like them, some people completely dismiss them and say they're absolutely terrible. Recently, when I rewatched them for the recap, I personally found that they aged pretty well for me. I actually ended up enjoying them a lot more this time around than when I watched them about 10 years ago. Although, what I will say is they still don't hold up to the original movie. And Matrix Resurrections has the same problem those films had, in that the original Matrix movie is such a masterpiece. And that's not something I say lightly, because when I recently watched it just a couple of days ago, the original movie, I hadn't watched it in about 10 years, maybe longer. I completely forgot certain elements of the movie. But regardless of the story, the filmmaking in the original Matrix movie was groundbreaking at times. And stuff like the editing is fantastic. The story is fantastic. Even the concept was original, unique, and fantastic. But all the sequels don't have that. They don't have the same surprise element the original one had. We know what to expect from a Matrix movie now. But also, I don't think they're ever going to live up to just how spectacular that original movie was. And really, in my opinion, the original Matrix movie should have been a standalone movie, and then it would possibly considered one of the greatest movies of all time. Come to think of it, I think it is in my 100 greatest ever movies countdown, and rightly so after watching it recently. I completely forgot what a masterpiece that movie is, and if I recommend one thing in this movie review, it's to go back and watch that original Matrix movie if you haven't watched it in a while, because it'll blow your mind just how good it is. It did for me. But back to Matrix Resurrections. Large parts of this movie, I found myself really enjoying it. And large parts of this movie, I found myself scratching my head going, wait a minute, what's happening? At times the movie is really good. It's got a real Matrix vibe to it. It feels like a Matrix movie. And at times, it almost feels like the filmmakers weren't quite sure what they were trying to do. Especially, spoiler alert here, I guess, because kind of a spoiler alert, I'm not going to give too much detail away, but what I will say is regarding the ending, if you don't want to know anything about the ending, probably click off here, but I'm not going to spoil it too much. I'm just going to say that the ending left me going, what? because the ending just seemed like a bit of a cop-out. It was very rushed, and overall the movie didn't seem to have an end goal as such. There will be a spoiler alert here, because their end goal does seem to be getting Neo and Trinity out of the Matrix. But they did that before, so it's not really a big thing. But it is a major thing now to get Neo and Trinity out of the Matrix. They take down the bad guy very, very quickly. Agent Smith is there somehow. It's just very rushed at the end. And it's a little bit disappointing because I found myself really enjoying major parts of this movie, as I say. It's, I think the ending let itself down a little bit. There's some great callbacks to the original one. The Merovingian pops up. The whole thing with Morpheus is a little bit weird because the Morpheus we get in this movie is the Morpheus from Neo's video game, or Thomas Anderson's video game, Inside the Matrix that he was making to keep him under the illusion that the Matrix wasn't real. To keep him taking his blue pills, he believed he made a video game called The Matrix, and he designed this character called Morpheus, who wasn't played by Lawrence Fishburne. That character then comes into the real world through some new technology they developed, but he's never actually physically in the real world, meaning Lawrence Fishburne was still Morpheus in the real world. We only see him in a statue form. And I guess we're kind of left to believe that Morpheus is dead now through old age, because I don't believe they ever just said he died doing this or he died doing that. They just showed a statue and talked about him in the past tense. Niobe from the original trilogy, she's in the movie and she's much older now, because as they mentioned, the events of this movie take place 60 years after the original movie, not just 20 like Neo thinks it is. They do answer questions like, how does Neo get his sight back? How does Trinity survive? How does Neo survive? Basically, they just said machines did it. So that was a thing. But it does make sense, and you can see they put a lot of thought into the reboot, even to the point where in the actual Matrix, there's a team talking about making a reboot of the Matrix video game. But for me personally, I felt it was really cool to go back to the Matrix universe because I really enjoyed the movies the first time around. As I mentioned, the sequel was a bit divisive. I always enjoyed them. I didn't think they were the worst sequels. I didn't think they were ever as good as the original movie, but as I mentioned already, I don't think anything ever will be regarding the Matrix. There will be better movies than the Matrix, just maybe not another Matrix movie that will ever be as good as the original. Matrix Resurrections did bring up a question for me that I never thought of regarding the original movies, but why isn't the end goal to destroy the Matrix and free all the humans? Because in this movie, machines are still using humans as batteries. Humans are still stuck in the Matrix. Now, they do address that they're trying to free some people, but shouldn't the goal in the Matrix ultimately be to destroy the Matrix and free all those humans that are not used as batteries? Maybe that's where they're going to go down with the next couple of movies, because I'm sure there will be more movies, because this movie should make a lot of money. Matrix is still a big thing. As I mentioned at the beginning, when the credits rolled on this movie, I ended up just sitting there going, what the hell happened there? It was going along at a good pace. There was a lot of interesting stuff happening, some good twists and turns. And then all of a sudden, the ending just went... It's a huge shame because, as I mentioned, I was enjoying major parts of this movie. It did leave me scratching my head at times, but ultimately it was a fairly enjoyable movie, just with a bad ending. So ultimately, we're going to come down to a rating out of 10. And for me, I've been debating whether I'm going to give it a 6 or a 7. That's the scope of where we are. For me personally, I'm going to be generous. It is Christmas after all, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. But this is where I throw it over to you guys, because I would love your opinions on Matrix Resurrections. Do you think it was one Matrix too many? Do you think it was 3 Matrixes? Matrixes is too many. It's a tough word to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But with all that being said and done, there's only one thing that's left to say. Thank you so much for watching.